Most people imagine a corporate budget as a sterile grid, a passive spreadsheet used merely to track future expenses and limit spending. In reality, an enterprise master budget is an aggressive, multi-dimensional control system. It dictates exactly how scarce resources, like cash reserves, labor hours, and raw materials, are distributed across massive corporate hierarchies. By setting these stringent guidelines in advance, management can spot exactly where resources are being used efficiently and where they are being wasted, long before an operational crisis actually hits. A firm lacking these quantified goals will struggle to evaluate its underlying assumptions or plan for future contingencies. A functional master budget serves four distinct purposes at once. It acts as a planning instrument, a control mechanism, a communication vector, and a motivational driver. When these four disparate tools are synchronized, they create a state called goal congruence. Goal congruence is the ideal operational state, where every tier of management, across every siloed department, actively works toward the exact same corporate objective. Without a single, unified budgetary constraint, individual departments will naturally optimize for their own local targets, actively working against one another and destroying company-wide alignment. Short-term operational budgets cannot exist in a vacuum. They are the final output of a strict architectural timeline. This timeline starts at the top. The board of directors formulates a mission statement, defining the qualitative reason the organization exists. Senior management translates that mission into a measurable strategic plan, projecting revenue and growth expectations out over 10 years or more. Middle management then takes those long-term goals and builds intermediate priorities, working with timeframes of up to 2 years. Finally, the cascade reaches lower management. They draft the operational budgets, converting those intermediate priorities into strict monthly or annual targets. These operational budgets are highly interdependent. Because production figures rely entirely on sales forecasts, a detailed budget manual is required to coordinate the distribution instructions across departments. Consider a common operational conflict. The sales department wants maximum inventory on hand to ensure they never lose a customer through a stockout. Meanwhile, the Treasury Department wants minimum inventory to preserve cash reserves. A formal budget resolves this tension. The strategic cascade forces a singular, quantified consensus. It ensures that daily, factory floor decisions mathematically support the long-term mission. While that mathematical architecture looks perfect on paper, formulating the actual numbers introduces immediate behavioral friction. Organizations generally choose between two opposing methodologies for setting standard costs and revenues: top-down, authoritative budgeting, or bottom-up, participative budgeting. This chart outlines each approach. Looking at the top-down row, imposing a budget from upper management ensures cross-functional consistency and requires far less time to implement. Even hiring an outside consulting firm to run the numbers is a form of top-down budgeting, and it often fails to account for the actual operational realities on the ground. Its primary weakness is behavioral. An imposed budget is much less likely to promote a sense of commitment from the lower-level employees forced to execute it. Now contrast that with bottom-up budgeting. This relies on input from middle and lower managers. While yielding better data, it introduces a major behavioral risk: the creation of budgetary slack. Budgetary slack is the deliberate underestimation of expected revenues, or the overestimation of expenses, by managers submitting their departmental numbers. Managers create this artificial buffer to protect themselves from unfavorable performance reviews. It proves that executing a successful budget requires managing human psychology just as closely as accounting principles. Once the fiscal year begins, the budget stops being a planning instrument and immediately activates as a control tool. This activates variance analysis, the ongoing process of comparing actual performance data against the budgeted expectations to assess whether a department is succeeding or failing. This chart shows how different budget types respond to volume changes. A static budget remains rigidly fixed at one planned level of activity. If volume shifts, the baseline stays the same. A flexible budget is far more useful. It actively scales its metrics based on the actual varying levels of activity, providing an accurate baseline for evaluation, regardless of external shifts. But evaluating managers on these variances requires adhering to a strict rule, the concept of controllability. Controllability dictates that a manager must only be evaluated on activities, revenues, and costs that they have the direct authority to influence. Establishing true controllability in practice is difficult, as very few costs are under the sole, isolated influence of one single manager. If senior management violates this principle by penalizing managers for non-controllable variances, they will instantly destroy morale and invalidate the budget as a motivational tool. The biggest mistake a company can make is treating a completed, approved budget as an unchangeable artifact. External industry shifts, like sudden competitor actions, supply chain disruptions, or new regulatory measures, will inevitably alter the baseline assumptions made during planning. Relying strictly on an artificial one-year time horizon limits a company's rapid response to these shifts. To adapt, many companies use continuous rolling budgets instead. To manage this volatility, companies rely on a 5-step control loop. It begins by establishing standards of performance and then measuring the actual results. Next, management analyzes the variance, devises corrective actions, and crucially, reviews and revises the standards. A formal policy to accommodate revisions is a necessary characteristic of successful budgeting. It prevents managers from being held to standards that are no longer mathematically possible. A modern master budget requires heavy automation to free up time for analysis. It must be iterative, and it must be visibly championed by senior leadership. Arbitrary across-the-board cost cuts fail because they ignore the precise operational math established in the strategic cascade. Senior management must demonstrate that they consider this allocation of internal resources vital to the organization's future to ensure the process succeeds. Ultimately, the budget functions as a forward-looking contract, aligning individual behaviors with the organization's overarching strategy.